This is a circle, it has no end, and that's how long. You're going to repeat the cycle until you break it. Did I come on too strong a little bit there? Well, it's time for us to evolve or repeat. Due to the state of, the world, I've been hearing a lot of history repeats itself. And it's got me to thinking, not just about the future of the United States, but the future of us as a collective. More specifically, why it seems like some of us keep listening to the same narratives that created the generational curses that we keep saying we're trying to break. Sometimes when I look at all the discourse online, I'll catch like an Easter egg or like a red flag in a seemingly progressive message. We're a generation that keeps talking about how we broke the scarcity mindset, but we overconsume at an alarming rate. We pride ourselves on having community, but that community only exists in a digital third space where the algorithm is manipulated by billionaires to make us believe that more people think like us than actually do. If you needed somebody to take you to the airport that wasn't a family member, do you have someone that you can literally call right now? There's so many people online, specifically mothers, parents, who talk about not having a village. We talk so much about the generational curses that we're breaking, but are we creating new ones? We broke the cycle of addiction, but how many screen time hours have you logged this week? Matter of fact, where's your vape right now? We keep saying we broke the cycle of toxic relationships, but we idolize the soft life traditional conservative marriages that historically had an imbalance of power. So much so that we had to fight to create literal laws to protect the housewives of the 50s and 60s. We're underestimating how little we actually know about our neighbors and the people that look like us too. As a collective, we voted into office a figurehead that represents the quite literal oppression of millions of people. And maybe you didn't personally, but we did. Our society did. And if you think I'm full of shit, check out the headlines for the past few weeks. I'm sure you've already seen a few because my timeline has been chock full of the latest executive order or senator trying to introduce bills to extend the presidential term and Roman salutes, and the literal Klan is having a resurgence. They've become so emboldened in Kentucky and Tennessee that they're handing out pamphlets in broad daylight, bitch. Other countries are protesting on behalf of the US. Did you know that? There are protests going on all over the world right now. But this podcast isn't about politics because I've gotten enough of politics to last me. Listen, I've had enough. So you can take a sigh of relief. This week's episode is about you. It's about life and why it seems like we keep making the same choices in different fonts. Those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. Evolve or repeat. And if you think you haven't been in a cycle, chances are you're just not looking close enough. Time for a quick intro. Welcome to Ceiling Rant. I'm Champagne, your pseudo-philosophizing, always chaotic hostess with the mostest, and designated trauma buddy. You may have guessed already, but this week's message is about change. It's about cycles. It's about breaking generational curses. I feel like that has gotten a lot of buzz with like the increase of like spirituality and therapy talk online and social media. And again, just like I was talking about in like the intro, everybody's algorithm is different. So sometimes I'll have like a conversation with someone and they'll start talking about like spirituality talk that they've seen on their timeline. And then we'll have like someone else in the conversation in real life, like standing in front of me and they're like, what the fuck are you guys talking about? So some people haven't been seeing a lot of this. It really just depends on what your timeline is, what your algorithm is dictating to you. But I think that we are having a lot of talk about breaking generational curses lately. And I think that it's important that we recognize that while we're breaking generational curses, we have to be cognizant to not create new ones, bitch. Like we are perpetuating, I think sometimes the same generational curses in a different font. If you are sensitive to profanity, I apologize in advance. If this is your first podcast episode, this is the first time you are hearing my voice and, joining us, welcome. And thank you for taking a listen. I do have a sailor's mouth. I'm working on it, but it's a work in progress and it's not yet complete. Okay. So bear with me. If you have littles around, you may want to like pop in the earbuds, because listen, I don't have, I kind of a little bit of a script initially, and then I just kind of, I bounce off of that, and we're going off script sometimes. You know, a bitch may slip out, a F-bomb, who knows, okay? So just, you know, be patient with me, and here we go. So the structure of this podcast, and honestly, I feel like the structure moving forward, yeah, you know what? This is the structure moving forward because I love organization, okay? Yes, Virgo rising, hello. Those of you that don't believe in astrology are probably like, girl, be quiet. But I truly do feel like my like inclination, I just have like a compulsion to have some sort of organization. I have to organize this. I can't just be talking into the mic and just word vomit. Okay, so structure. A word, a story, a reflection, and then this week you get some homework because y'all need homework, okay? You're falling behind in class and you need homework. Okay, so the word for this week, and not like word as in like a literal word, but like word as in the message, okay? The message for this week is to pay attention to your cycles, like pay attention to generational curses, right? Pay attention to cycles in your family trauma that seems to be repeating itself, behaviors and decisions that seem to be repeating themselves, okay? Pay attention to those and see if you can spot them repeating in other aspects of your life. Just like I was talking about with addiction, I feel like our generation, specifically millennials, we have gotten really good about being open and vocal and talking about our trauma and our experiences and the things that impacted us and like being very informed, right? Like when we talk about like the crack epidemic, when we talk about, you know, just all sorts of things like drug and alcohol use. I know a lot of millennials who, and even Gen Z, have kind of turned the tide on reducing alcohol intake and not being, you know, as loosey-goosey. I can't think of a better terminology. Loosey-goosey girl with the drugs, okay? Because if you remember in the early, I want to say like in the early 2010s, there was like a huge like rise of like drug rappers. Like everybody's on promethazine, everybody's popping mollies and sweating, woo, like everybody. It was just drugs. And I think that this new generation has started to be like, you know what, maybe like we don't want to all be on like a bunch of drugs and ODing. We also saw like a lot of rappers who were like ODing and stuff like that. And when we talk about specifically topics of addiction, that's one thing for me that is quite personal because I grew up in an environment where addiction was prevalent and rampant. My environment was surrounded by people who were active drug users. My parents used drugs pretty frequently. My parents had addiction issues, substance abuse issues as well, when we're talking about things like alcohol addiction, right? Alcohol abuse disorder, I think is what they call it now. But both alcohol and drugs, both of my parents. When we talk about breaking generational curses and feeling like, oh, well, you know, I'm not addicted to any drugs, I'm not an alcoholic, but you can't spend a whole day without scrolling on your phone, or you are addicted to your vape. I feel like we're not breaking any curses, okay? These generational curse breakers ain't breaking curses. We are just writing them in a different font, okay? We have decided to take the curses out of cursive and put them in like shorthand. So the message for this week is just to be mindful of your choices and when you are repeating a cycle or repeating a pattern, or when you're behaving in a way that matches up with the curse that you're trying to break. I know we talk a lot too about lack mindset and scarcity mindset on social media. I know a lot of like spirituality girlies talk about it, and manifestation and all those good things. But just in general, even if you don't believe in that stuff, talking about having a lack mindset or a scarcity mindset or coming from poverty, that can manifest in so many different ways. You'll think, oh yeah, I broke that cycle. I'm not worried and I'm successful and I'm, comfortable financially, but you shopping on Shein like she ain't gonna run out of shit. Okay. It's compulsive behavior. All of it is compulsive behavior. And again, I'm not a therapist. This is just my personal observations and my experiences as someone who's endured a lot of trauma and has grown up, witnessing these things and watching how they evolve and how they mutate in a sense, right? I almost talk about, these types of behaviors like diseases, because it really does feel like it is, hereditary, where you inherit these types of behaviors from your parents and your parents' parents, and they appear in different fonts and formats. And sometimes you don't catch them if you're not being very careful, if you're not being diligent, if you're not being introspective, if you're not doing the work of dissecting who you are. Because it's really easy to judge and like look at everybody else's behavior, but like taking a look inward is very, very difficult to say like, wait, am I perpetuating these things that I'm judging you for? I can sit here all day and be like, my mom was an alcoholic and she was a drug addict and she prioritized men over her children and she made all these bad choices. But if I'm making the same damn choices in a different font, you know what I'm saying? Like I was addicted to nicotine, smoking a pack a day of cigarettes, okay? And then went to vapes thinking it was better, but was still hitting that vape. Girl, that vape, my breath smelled like strawberry, lemon, melon, fucking ice, pineapple ass juice. Okay? Sugar sprinkle, whipped cream all day, every day. I'm not beating the cycle of addiction. I just got a new one. Okay? I just got a less deadly one and I'm calling myself better. You know what I'm saying? And not in the sense of like better than my parent, but saying like, oh, well, I'm not doing that. Yeah, but you're doing this, which is also an addiction. So if you really truly want to break that cycle, and it's not to say like doing better than your parents did, even if you're repeating some of these behaviors, that deserves to be celebrated, right? That you're not falling into the same patterns. But if you truly want to break the cycle, you have to break it, not just like bend it a little bit. You know what I mean? If you really want to break it, you have to break it. And so I had a really hard time overcoming my vape addiction, girl, my nicotine addiction. I was hitting that vape. And especially after when I joined the military, because smoking and vaping is so like, it's like second nature. Okay. Everybody takes a smoke break. Everybody goes and, hangs out in the pit and goes and smokes. And that's just like a thing. I was even dipping for a while. Okay. If you know what that is, then you know how disgusting that. Okay. Yeah. I was doing that for a while. Okay. And, it's gross, but at the time it felt normal. And it was like, yeah, everybody's doing it. Everybody in uniform has their little pouches and they put it in their lip and everybody's like spitting. That's so gross. I can't believe I did that. But addiction. And, I think we have to be really mindful and catch ourselves. I see it too, just in the way that our society seems to be transforming before our eyes online. And I think maybe it slowly made this progression and we just didn't notice because we were making decisions that we thought were the opposite of the generation before us, but they were actually parallel. They just looked different. They were just differently colored, but they were parallel. Because how the fuck did we end up back at like ultra conservatism? Do you know what I mean? Like, we're not making different choices if the premier influencers of our time are Nara Smith, bitch. Like, we didn't make a huge change. We're cycling back. The cycle is repeating. And I feel like I talk about Nara all the time. I don't know any other trad wife content creators. I promise you I'm not bagging on Nara. I just don't know any other one. If y'all know some, let me know so I can use a different example because I feel like people are going to be like, you're obsessed with Nara. I'm not. I don't follow any other people who like give that representation or like give that vibe off. So that's the only example I have. But, how do we end up back at like hyper masculinity, like podcast bullshit, fucking misogyny, like outward, like we've always had misogyny, but like outwardly advocating for misogyny and sexism and these guys are gaining millions of the platforms are huge. How do we end up back there? Like we were very, very much shaming that type of behavior. And we ended up back at like men outwardly calling women broads. Like, what's happening? I don't like this. And I think it's just a bunch of little choices that we made as a society that led here. I was watching someone on TikTok talk about how we don't have a third space, and our third space is the internet, because we used to congregate in, like, for teens, it used to be the malls or like, coffee shops or go to like clubs. People still go clubbing, but like not the way, like club culture even is different. Nobody's like dancing in the club anymore. Like from my understanding, because I was too young, okay, by the time I got to the clubs, it was already deteriorating. Clubs used to be like Nelly Hot in Her, okay? Hot in Her. Everybody was dancing. There was maybe like a couple seated sections like far away. The last time I went to a club, damn near everybody was sitting down. The only people really preserving like club culture are the Europeans, because when I was in Germany, when I was in Germany, the clubs were clubbing, okay? They were playing shit from like 2002, but it was it was clubbing, okay? They don't have the new American music, but they like, it's a club. They're like, everybody's dancing. And anyway, this creator on TikTok was like, yeah, we don't have a third space, so we're congregating online. And I have a whole nother podcast episode I'm going to go into about the church, because other people were in the comments like, well, what about church? And there's been a huge decline of millennials and Gen Z that are actively attending church in person. And they may follow pastors on social media, but they are not congregating. They're not congregating the way that the previous generations were. And this is like, regardless of what your religious, whatever your religion is, right? Whatever your denomination is, if you're a Christian, like regardless of whatever it is, we're just not attending physically. And I think that that's due to a number of factors, but I'm going to cover that in a different podcast. That could be its whole own podcast. But essentially, the lack of the third space and the reliance on social media and the internet as the third space, because we don't have community in real life. The reliance on a third space that feeds us exactly what we are and shows us only things that we would believe or listen to keeps us stagnant. It keeps us in the same place. There's no diversity of thought, which means that you are making the same decisions over and over again because those decisions seem right, because all you see is confirmation bias. People who believe the same things that you believe and say the same things that you say, and you don't perceive the world the way that it really is. You perceive the world in your own little thought bubble. I think that contributes too to us not breaking some of these curses, because, hey, everybody else is doing the thing that I'm doing. No, they're not. Everybody else that you see is doing the thing that you're doing, because your algorithm wants you to stay on the app. So it's feeding you the same ideas and the same culture and the same clothing and the same food and the same political views. It's feeding you that. And it would be hypocritical of me to say, because I'm a person who creates content on the internet, it would be hypocritical of me to say it's all the internet's fault. But I think that is a contributing factor too, that unless we make a concerted effort to seek outside, to seek diversity of thought, to seek things that will conflict what we believe, we have no way to view the world the way that it actually is. And we have no way to really be introspective and to analyze ourselves, to say, am I wrong? Sometimes you have to check yourself. And if you're unwilling to check yourself, then you're unwilling to change. And if you're unwilling to change, then you're unwilling to do better, have better, be better. Okay. Like you're just not going to reach the heights that you want to reach if you are remaining stagnant. And you remain stagnant. I'm not editing that out. Listen, I'm tired. Okay. My almost 1-year-old woke up at 4. Can you believe that Bean is almost 1? Okay. That's an aside. If you are not consistently, I have to edit that one out. I'm not gonna. If you are not consistently committed to trying to call yourself out, right? Trying to be introspective and analyzing, like, are these beliefs really valid? Or, do I have some sort of bias that I need to investigate? Are these behaviors things that I really want to continue? Or if they are behaviors that you've recognized are like, I really want to stop binge eating. Why am I doing that? Why is it every time I get paid, I feel like I have to have a 20-piece lemon pepper hot, fried hard, and some fries and a large Coke, and I'm trying to lose weight, and why do I keep doing this? And am I repeating a cycle? Right? Like, because I went to college and I, got a degree, and I'm, working this corporate job, and I'm making a lot of money, and I'm feeling really good and secure and safe. And I broke the cycle of my parents, this poverty cycle, right? But you didn't break the lack mindset and the scarcity mindset. Then wings gonna be there next week. You don't have to right now. It's okay. And also, like, I think in particular for me, on that note, for me, it was not wanting to deny myself things, because I grew up very poor. and was denied things. I was the Goodwill kid. I very rarely got brand new clothing. And when I did, it was because a family member bought it for me. It was not because my parents bought it. Like, it was like, oh, Christmas, someone bought you a brand new pair of jeans or a brand new jacket or brand new shoes. And so I have a problem with trying to treat myself too much, right? There's no balance because the beginning part of my life, my childhood, was so imbalanced that once I had the resources and the means, I couldn't check myself. I didn't know how to parent myself. I didn't know how to introspect and say, wait, am I making good decisions? Okay, sure, I got it like that. I'm not hurting myself because I continue to got it, right? Like, the money keeps coming in. I feel like I'm not harming anybody because I'm not going broke. But I'm making bad, compulsive choices. I'm making choices out of hurt. I'm making choices out of a feeling like, oh, I have to have it because I don't want to deny myself anything because I've been denied things my whole life. That is a trauma response. It's not a choice. You have to stop that compulsive. I had to stop. I'm not going to tell you what to do. You can do whatever you want to do, but I had to stop that kind of compulsive, like, oh no, I have to do, oh, I really want to, I'm not going to deny myself that because I can. Trauma response. Repeating cycles. They look different, but they are the same cycle. It's scarcity. It's a lack mindset. It's a feeling like maybe you won't have it again. Maybe I won't be able to get that. If I don't get it now, I might not be able to get it. Scarcity, lack. And the same with addiction, and the same with this pick me. I could do a whole nother episode on pick me. I'm not going to do that. We have a lot of episodes to get through, okay? If I could just stay organized. But truly, the message is introspect and watch your behaviors and watch to make sure that you are not perpetuating the same curses you're trying to break in a different font. Because especially if you have children, you don't want your children to have to grow up and heal from you and fix the things that they imitated about you unknowingly. Okay. And that's for me too. Okay. Whenever I call y'all out, I'm calling me out too. This is a free for all. Okay. Anybody can get it. You can get it. I can get it. So that is the message, okay? Message. A word. Okay, chapter 2. I love how I'm narrating this to you guys today. I've had my coffee. If you're having your coffee or if you're folding those clothes in the corner that you need to fold, that are just sitting there looking at me, looking at you looking at it, fold them clothes, okay? I'm sick of you. Or you're having your coffee or you're having your morning drive, I love that I'm just storytelling to you guys. I love the podcast because I get to do exactly what the title of the podcast is. This is my ceiling rants I used to do on IG, only they are longer, long-winded. And, we just get to vibe together. All right, so a word. A word is over. Let's get into a story. Now, some of you already know this story because you've read my book, Weak Ink, available on Amazon. Sorry, shameless plug. But my mother left my father on the heels of him quite literally mangling my face. He hit me in the face so many times that my face was completely swollen. My eye was swollen shut, bruised and bloody, black and blue, literally black and blue, that my mother had to keep me home from school for weeks until my face, the swelling went down and I could be recognizable again. It was that bad. One of my eyes is still smaller than the other, I suspect because of some damage to my orbital bone, of my eye socket. Okay. That's how bad it was. Like, bitch, I look like Nosferatu. It was bad. It was giving Notre Dame. Okay. And I remember as a child, I think I was 12. Yeah, it was 12. And at the time, as a child, preteen, I thought to myself, when my mother decided to leave him, she's finally making a decision to protect me. Like, she does love us, right? Like, she's trying to protect us. She's getting us away from him. And I remember thinking so highly of her that she was making that decision to leave him. And so we packed up our things. We left in the middle of the night. We went to stay and live with my aunt for a while until my uncle was able to help us find a different place in another city, okay? But upon moving to that new city, I want to say less than a month, okay? Maybe a month of us being there, my mother started to behave differently, strangely, okay? She was staying out later. I was home with my sisters, watching my sisters all hours of the night. She was coming home drunk. She was, I was like, something's going on, okay? Come to find, she was dating a new man. This was very shortly after we moved into this new place, okay? So couldn't have been maybe 6 months after leaving my father. And the guy that she was dating was one of my dad's oldest friends, like a best friend of his, essentially. Is a guy that I'd known, through childhood, but I didn't remember him. He used to be around a lot when I was very little, okay, and hung around my dad a lot, and they ran in the same circles, and they were very close. The closest thing that I remember my dad having to a best friend, to my knowledge, okay, and she moved him into the house very quickly with me and my sisters, and I almost immediately knew something was amiss. Something was up. I didn't like the way that he looked at me. I didn't like the way that he spoke to me, the way that he acted around me. And I didn't like the way that my mom acted around him. And I was like, this is trouble. I was a very perceptive child early on, but you don't have to be perceptive as a woman to know when you are in danger, okay? My spidey senses were tingling, and I was confused as to why my mom thought this was a good idea to bring this stranger into our home, to be living with us, right? Granted, I know that he was close to my dad when I was younger. Like, this guy was a stranger to me in my adolescence. He hadn't been around for quite some time. When he first came around, I was like, oh yeah, I remember when you used to want to be a ballerina. Bitch, I was 3 when I wanted to be a ballerina, 4, 5. Like, I don't remember you. Like, I've seen pictures of you. I know my dad used to go hang out with you. But like, I don't know you. I'm like, 14 now, 15 now, and so I remember feeling very betrayed by her. I remember feeling like, why can't you just have us? Why do you need to have some man here? Why can't we be enough? Me and my sisters, we haven't even been living in this house for a year, and you have this guy in here. We've only been away. I think she'd been separated from my dad for about a year. We were living with my aunt, right? So it wasn't 6 months. It was about a year that we had been separated from my dad. My dad, basically, we packed up and left the house, and he just ended up living on the streets, right? He was homeless. We moved out in the middle of the night, and he was out on the street. And we stayed with my aunt for like a year, I want to say about. Okay? So we haven't been living in this new place for a month or two. And now this new guy is here, and you want to move him in. I felt very betrayed. And I didn't start to reflect on it until much later, but I do believe that my mother didn't feel like she could just be without the presence of a man. Okay, we're talking like OG pick me. Okay, what is my value if I'm not attached to a man, if someone will not choose me or be with me? She just could not be single. Like, she just could not do it. And oh my gosh, it was just the bane of my existence. What is wrong with you? And this is, we're in modern times, and you can do it by yourself. And I'm a child. I'm not thinking about the fact that people, you as an adult, as a human, right? We all crave romantic and affection and to be loved in that way. But from my perspective, we just left a very traumatic environment. Can you give me a fucking second of normalcy before you introduce something else traumatic, bitch? And so I harbored a lot of resentment, like, for her, for that, especially after he attempted to rape me in our home while she was gone. And subsequent to that, me telling her about that, she didn't kick him out. She kicked me out and said, you need to leave, because she wasn't going to choose me over someone who made her feel whole, right? She wasn't going to choose her children. And then later I discover, much later, before my mother passed away, I learned that she actually didn't leave my father because he had beaten me so badly. She left him because she said, oh no, it was because he wouldn't get a job. Like, I was tired of like working and taking care of everything on my own. I'm like, not me holding that. And I held that for years as like the one redeeming thing. Like, she may have done all these things, but as soon as he, really like hurt me and, where I honestly should have been hospitalized, she left. As soon as he did that, she left. And then to come to find out right before she passed, I don't know how many, 20 years later, that no, she left because he wouldn't get a job. I was like, I know you fucking lying. But, I think back to that because I thought that I would never make choices like that. I would never betray myself for a man. Wrong. Because I did have a pick-me era. Granted, I didn't have children. I did have make choices that were prioritizing that of a man. It was a guy that I dated a long time ago before I met my husband. And I remember watching something on TikTok about basically saying, women are socialized to drop everything when you meet like the guy. This is the one. Drop everything and like prioritize relationships. Whereas men are socialized to like, oh, I'm not dropping everything for you. How many times have you heard of a man like not going to a certain college because he wants to stay with the hometown girlfriend? It never happens. Rarely, okay? Rarely happens. However, it is seemingly commonplace, or nobody would bat an eye if a woman said, oh, I'm just gonna drop out of school and follow the love of my life around. He's joining the military, he's gonna be active duty, and I'm gonna do that. And I'm not throwing shots at anybody, just to make that clear. This is the example that I saw on the TikTok, right? And a boy would never do that because boys are not socialized to do that. A guy would never say, I'm going to drop everything and I'm just going to drop everything and follow this girl around while she travels the world. Because women are socialized to prioritize settling down and finding the love of their life. And I was making, unknowingly, unbeknownst to myself, I was making the same decisions that my mom was making and betraying myself and keeping myself stagnant for the affections of and the attention of a man that was not stopping his life for me. Okay? He was not going to stop doing what he was doing. He wasn't going to stop going to college or finding new hobbies or traveling the world. And I sat my dumb ass home and waited, right? Lessons. I was making the same choices, but I was thinking, well, I'm not hurting anybody and I don't have kids. And, this is different. This is different. Yeah, different font. Same choice. Okay. And now that I'm able to kind of look back and perceive that, hindsight is 2020, to go, I understand as a woman, I understand. As a mother, I still am like, girl, you was tripping. As a mother, I could never, but as a woman, I understand, especially now looking back at the choices that I made that I'm, embarrassed about. I feel like, everybody has that embarrassing relationship that they're like, what the fuck was I thinking? Oh my God. And that was mine. And so, I think that when we are able to look back, we're able to have compassion, but compassion is only part of the equation. You need to have compassion and understanding, but you also need to be committed to making different choices, and not just bar for bar. Sometimes the different choice, sometimes it's going to be the same choice, but it's going to look differently, maybe disguised as something else. And you need to be able to suss that out so that you don't unknowingly make the same decisions. Because I often think back, granted, everything works out the way that it's supposed to work out. And I'm married to my husband now, who I love dearly. Oh my gosh. the most unproblematic man in history. Let me not even say that, because once you start saying something positive about somebody, they start showing their ass. But married to an amazing man, have 2 beautiful children, just living a very happy life, right? So things worked out ultimately. But I oftentimes think back and wonder, wow, what would have happened if I would have just went to the college that I got accepted to, instead of like staying for a boy? What if I would have done XYZ instead of, you know what I mean? Like, I wonder what my life would have been like if I would have made choices for myself and loved myself enough not to betray myself in that way, to hold off on life for somebody who wouldn't hold off on life for me. And so I think in investigating that and going back and being introspective and reflecting on that, I'm able to highlight and identify okay, this is what I was feeling. These are the triggers for me. And this is where I can make choices better in the future to avoid doing something like that again. And so that leads us to our reflection. Okay. Here's your reflection and your homework. Okay. The homework that I'm going to be assigning you, okay, for this week is to look back if you made resolutions, or if you have whatever people do, like their vision boards or whatever, since we're still in January, right? We're at the end of January. I want you to check in on your resolutions, but I also want you to check in on the things that you put down on your vision board. And I want you to be introspective and write down why you think that you haven't achieved those things already. Like, why are they on your vision board? How come you didn't hit that goal already? How long has it been on your vision board? And what choices do you need to make in order to make those things materialize, in order to make those things happen? If it's weight loss, how come you haven't hit that goal already? What choices are you making? Be really honest with yourself. Be kind with yourself, but be honest as well. I really could be eating better. I really could be moving more. And why aren't you? What are you prioritizing instead of that? And see if there's a generational curse hiding anywhere in there, that you are making some decisions based on trauma responses, based on hurt. For me, one thing that I noticed that was really big is my weight gain. When I was younger, I gained weight rapidly. I've been around the same size the majority of my life. I hit 11 and 12 years old, which is that was a very tumultuous, between the ages of 8 and 13 was probably the most traumatic. And that's even before we get to high school and sexual assaults and, DUIs and my sister's murder. That's before we even get there. Okay. That's the first stage of traumatic events for me. I remember wanting to be bigger physically, wanting my arms to be bigger and strong. And now that I'm older and in my 30s, I'm oh, I hate how big my arms are, right? I think sometimes too, mentally, I brought that into existence by wanting to be bigger so bad, because I didn't want attention. I didn't want sexual attention towards me, because I developed relatively fast. I was not a part of the itty bitty titty committee. Okay. I was big titty girl, big titty Betty, very young. And so, I didn't want the negative attention initially in middle school and stuff. I just felt very awkward. Everybody does. Everybody has their awkward phase when they're going through puberty. But I remember wanting to be bigger and stronger to fight off advances. And then I remember wanting to diet, because early 2000s, I was oh no, now I'm too fat. I need to go on, every diet known to man. And that pendulum swing is something that became my dieting highs and lows, my yo-yo dieting. That was the kickoff from that. And going back and analyzing and thinking back to what's been stopping me from hitting my weight loss goals. It's this feeling that I have to be strong, physically, bigger, scared to be, hurt, physically hurt, held down, having someone force themselves upon me. There's an intrinsic, not intrinsic, but there's an internal thing that I had to work through mentally to release some of this weight and feel I don't need this armor anymore. I don't need that. and the compulsion to overeat, overconsume, because I don't know when I'm going to have the money again. I don't know when I'm going to have food again, because I grew up, food insecurity and very poor. It's a combination of a bunch of different things that have kept me at a weight that I didn't really want to be at because of all these past things that have happened. And I had to be honest with myself and be introspective about it and think about why am I having this blockage? Why have I not hit this goal that I want to hit for myself? Is there something else aside from you're just lazy, right? And not being very kind to myself, because I did that for long enough. And let me be completely honest with you. If being mean to yourself and being hard on yourself worked, it would have worked already. We are so mean to ourselves. If being hard on yourself worked, you would already be a millionaire, be at your goal, be an author, be a whatever, be, top of the class, be an A+ student, be married, be whatever it is that you're like, oh, I wish I could just do. If being hard on yourself worked, you would already be there. It doesn't work. Let's try some kindness and compassion and sensitivity, and let's try loving on ourselves. So that is your homework, okay? Go back to your vision board, go back to your resolution, and be introspective and think about why you don't have those things. Instead of coming up with a plan for how you're going to achieve them, think about why you haven't achieved them already, and think like, am I making self-destructive decisions low key and I didn't notice them? And if the answer is yes, why are you making those self-destructive decisions? I think we take it one step, but we need to take it like another step further. We go like, oh yeah, like I'm just not exercising. And why? Well, I don't have time. I'm tired. Why? What are we prioritizing? And again, not being hard on ourselves, being soft with yourself. Because if you're hard on yourself, you're going to have resistance, internal resistance. It's just going to happen. Be soft with yourself and say, what's one thing that I can like call myself out on? Just practice calling yourself out on it, not even changing it. Don't even have to change it. Just practice calling awareness to it. Oh, I'm doing it again. Because you'll be surprised how quickly you start to make changes once you can call yourself out. But you have to be able to call yourself out first. The change will happen naturally once you're able to notice it. But if you keep ignoring it, you're going to keep making the same choices. So that's your homework, and I will expect you guys to report back in my stories. I will check on this, okay? I will check on this in my Instagram stories and see if you guys completed your homework. Let me know what you guys thought of this week's podcast. I love this structure, doing, the message, like a story, a personal story, a little reflection with some homework. I love that. Let me know if you guys like this new structure. If you're on Spotify, you can leave comments. Leave me a comment, okay? Leave me a comment. Let me know what you think. And I will catch you guys in the next one. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. All right. Love you. Bye.